So anyway, one of his sons had just come out of the army, and he had a little folding camera, 120 camera, nothing special. So that was what I first played around with, and that was in the official, which was right opposite New Street in Braintree. Stanley Digby, the fishmonger, one of the old established fishmongers, and his son works in the shop. One of them had a camera that I bought from him, and I put a film in it, and I walked outside the shop one day, and Braintree Carnival was just starting. Came along, and that's old Inspector Baker, Crucian they called him, Inspector Baker there, and the carnival was coming up the High Street, and I went out and took a picture, and I can honestly think that is the very first time I clicked the camera. It must have been. Anyway, that I was going to give to the Police Museum, because they might want a record of old Crucian. He was a very famous police inspector that stood at the bottom of Moulton Street years ago, London Road, directing traffic through the town. So he was very well known, especially in the wartime. But then, from there, a very famous police inspector that stood at the bottom of Moulton Street years ago, London Road, directing traffic through the town. So he was very well known, especially in the wartime. But then, from then onwards, instead of going in the army, my mother wrote letters saying, could my son join the army? And they sent a letter back, which I've still got, saying that I could only go, owing to his date of age, I could only go his own request. So rather than go in the army, I joined worked on the farm, because I lived on the farm. But I wasn't allowed to work on my own farm, but I could join the Agricultural Society, where I used to be pulling sugar beet, 4 bob an acre or something, knocking them together and laying them on the ground, which built me up to being a boxer. I had the most powerful shoulders. So when we joined Braintree Youth Centre, we had the famous trainer Sandy Lindsay from Scotland, who was a Scottish featherweight champion, and he taught us the art of boxing as the same as Cassius Clay did today. That's the only perfection way of boxing. We proved once, and I had an open air boxing match in Black Notley one day, and the bloke came up to me with who I was going to fight. Oh, he said, I can't lose, he said, because my girlfriend's in the audience and he's wearing yellow socks. Anyway, as true as I'm sitting here, he came out and I could give him a straight left, and he sat on his behind, knocked him out, they came out of the ring in the first second of a fight. Then that was I should never have done before. They carried him out of the ring. Perfectly true. And his name, I think, was Maloney, as far as I can remember. But that was, and then of course, again, in it before, going back to history, I had 2 interesting people come in my shop, which is in Malden Road. And one bloke said, do you remember me? He said, I'm the bloke you beat up in the playground. I remember the fight. He was the local school bully and was fighting everybody. Anyway, I don't know how it happened, he picked on me. And at the finish, the crowd had to pull me off him, I was killing him. And therefore, I had very powerful shoulders, I was very fit, pulling these sugar beet, I was just tough. And they couldn't help me with body punches. Anyway, then a man came in the shop He said, I thought you, no, do you remember me? I said, your name is Woods. He said, that's right. Anyway, he hit me very hard on the left side of the head, and I was walking around a fortnight in a daze. So I gave up boxing. I said, no more of this. This is it, I'm going to. So anyway, but before that I had a notable fight in Bishop's Stortford in the open air again, and they were all pairing up people who to fight. I was with the Felsters Club at that time. They were pairing us up who's to me, and I was 10 stone 4. So this bloke it was in the army looked like a pocket Freddie Mills. He was a little tough bastard, and his manager who was with him smoking his kush. I needed to come after all, did I? When he saw me. Anyway, in the first round, I was so scared. It was the first time I've ever thought of my mother. I was absolutely petrified. I never fought anybody outside of any quality anywhere. Anyway, in the first round, he hit me with 3 very heavy punches. His manager said, hit him round the heart and slow him down. Well, that didn't take any note on me, did it? Anyway, then I suddenly remember what old Sandy always told me, that a boxer would beat a fighter. So all I done then, I just kept in the middle of the ring, poking out bloody lefts and right, and going, making him running around me in circles. In the third round, the last round, he was so puffed running around me he could hardly stand up. I could have killed him. He had a big blodge on under his eye, what we call a mouse in them days. Anyway, I just kept on hitting him with straight lefts and letting him run around me. And in the third round, he was so puffed he could hardly stand up. He was absolutely exhausted. I could have killed him. I could have killed him, but I was more concerned with surviving, let alone beating anybody. Anyway, I won that on points. God knows how. Anyway, but that's my experience of boxing, apart from giving one little exhibition to a sailor who's in the Navy about that height. And we said before, and I said, well, be gentle, just, you know, do this and the other. And all of a sudden, a punch went past my snout like that. I thought, well, you want to play the game, mate, play it, I don't care. He was half my height. Anyway, I finished up nearly killing him. I just let go and, well, it went to 3 rounds, but he had a bustle. But since getting that hard punch at Moulds, I thought, that's the end of Better Place Avenue. This tree's gone now, this is the end of the road where we're sitting on now. I dug that out, I poked one of those through that person's letterbox the other day. She doesn't know where it come from. Here we have is Clarissa, the woman cook, remember? She teared it up here. And this is when Lord Litchfield came to my show, and it's one of my display boards. I never sell them normally, but I said, well, yes, he's going to a good home. He wrote me, I've still got a copy of the cheque for 250 quid, which he went and wrote out. And so that's where that one's gone to. But the photographs, I could go through here. That glamorous young lady came and put her arm around Charlie, my fox. I said, would you come and give Charlie a cuddle? She's from North Yorkshire somewhere. I used to send her a Christmas card, but I've lost her address now. But there's another lady I met. This is one of the typical ones where I travelled the country fairs exhibiting bygones. I never sold anything, but I exhibited them. And I had a display of old cartridges, because I collect old shotgun cartridges, and I gave a display there, and I was always crowded out. They were fascinated by people who weren't selling anything. And here we go with that's my old Riley car I had. I put my animals around it one day and took a picture of it. And I wish I'd still got it actually, but I sold that. gun blue. I formed a firm years ago with Bunning called Gun Blue. We used to blue gun barrels. When I first left the Chronicle, one of my jobs, I employed old George from Leach's, who was a barrel bluing expert. Ernie Dowers came there to look at that. Is he on one of the photographs somewhere? Yeah, in fact, that is Ernie Dow himself, having to go with one of my guns. And old Jack Ashford. I won a magnum of champagne in a raffle at the Norfolk show. It was a bit of a cheat, really. I saw the members on the stand buying all the last tickets. Well, I nipped in and got the very last one. And of course, I think they put that ticket on the top of the drawer, and lo and behold, Crowe's name came up. So I did a bit of scheming there. That's one of my early stands at the Essex show. I used to exhibit all that sort of stuff. And what have we got here? There's Chelmsford Charlie, my fox, being looked at by another fox. See, all this was all a big laugh at the time. There's my old Riley car. Look at that. I wish I still got it. Oh, somebody looking at my stand. We could go on forever. Look at that one for a laugh. It's even got the Iron Cross. And a German came and looked at it one day. He said, "Where did you get that from?" He said. I said, "Oh, Hitler gave it that." He said, "That's the First World War one." Well, he's got the date on it. I didn't know. But this was the famous, I call him Chatsworth Charlie because that's where he first started. And that's been photographed more times by children standing beside it and than any fox on earth. And I've still got it, it's up in the attic. I've already got it out. Well, I did get it out one day, the old car. Sporting bygones, I called myself. Sporting bygones. And that's what the cartridge collectors did. We met on the grass at the game fair years ago and swapped our cartridges. This was at one game fair in Yorkshire. So you can see it always attracted a crowd. They always like to see this sort of stuff. And as I was the only one not taking money, it's not very often you see 3 white squirrels. So I think they came from Southminster way, somebody had them down there. I said, "Could I borrow them?" And they did. I appeared with old Dick Joyce on Anglia television years ago with my cartridge collection. And I went in through the back door and laid all the cartridges out and got them all laid out. And then he came and said, "Oh, can you bring your lot through the front door?" I said, "They're already in the back door." So that's what he talked about. So we had the World Cup final, and these squirrels all sat there playing cards, all stuffed, sat in chairs, and some lady looked at them and said, all those poor little things, she said, they're playing cards, she said. I said, what matter they don't cheat very much. I forget what I did say to her. Sporting bygone, that's one, just to record my, what I get up to or got up to. That was always attracted a crowd because I could talk to them about any subject. That dirty Great Dane there, bigger than the Ronnie Fox. Oh, this is one of my favourite pictures here. This fox retrieving a pheasant. That now hangs in some wonderful places. I've got a stuffed deer as well, somewhere. It's in a shed somewhere. But that was knocked over on the road at Thetford. Apparently it's got collectible horns, because some bloke said if you got that to Spain, he says you'd make a fortune with that head. Well, he's never got to Spain yet. That's an old copy in the Essex Chronicle years ago. Yeah. Another one of Charlie in the box. Oh, this was one of the pose-up ones. I had this on display once and a lady said, how long does it take to train that fox to do that? I said, oh, about a couple of weeks if you're lucky. And that caused a lot of attention because the old Labrador looks on saying, what the hell am I doing here? So with a lot of imagination and the camera, you can get away with murder. That was one of my early shows. That was at least being a photographer, I have recorded most of what I got up to. R.J. Thompson was the only man that, up on the stone, where they put the print laid in all the print, all back to front, upside down, ready to go on the machine that printed them. When old Ernie Bradley up on the stone would say that's got to be shortened from that distance to that distance, Thompson would just get a pencil and go zoom, 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 and do that. And old Ernie Bradley said there's not a bloke in England, not a bloke in England could do that. And it would all make sense literally, legally. But Thompson could do it. He was a genius. And as I was brought up without a father, he was respected. Somebody died, and Hanley took over as editor. I think that's right. And but because he was never, well, because I don't remember back then, he was never, I mean, we were all spoiled by Thompson, who was no doubt a genius. He knew everything in there. And I also remember I went to Colchester for football. In those days we had 5x4 play cameras, and he would look up at a negative and say, could I got a picture of a whole row of footballers kicking the balls up? And he said, oh, print that corner of the negative, print that. Anyway, so I did a whole print of this row of, all was the back view of bloody footballers. Oh, he said, do a big print of that. And so we did a big print, and it was appeared in the paper, the Colchester Conga. They've got one leg here and one leg out there, and he spotted it, you see. And so he did that, and he would often look at the negative and the film, and I could think one or two times when he just spotted the photograph that I hadn't spotted, and but one thing I did learn, and one thing I can always remember what I think Lord Lichfield said, never take the last film on your camera. Always leave one exposure there. Never finish the film up. And that happened going through the back roads of Waltham. When I went to get a branch on a Wednesday, there was this little kid being drowned in a quagmire of silk in a gravel pit over the road and to the left. There was this kid being sucked in by this quicksand, and the coppers were there. This policeman, they were there, and he was walking up to his waist in mud to get to this kid. And I was clicking away, but the picture which would have made every national newspaper, this copper went right up to his neck in this mud and grabbed this kid and pulled it out. And I hadn't got a picture because I'd taken the last one. Now, I can still see the picture now, but I hadn't got a film in the camera. And I always remembered that, never take that last film, because you never know. I've often thought about calling on the house opposite to see if that kid's still alive or what's what. You never know. It's still all part of history. And you can remember that several times, things like that. So one thing to remember, don't empty your camera. Today with digital wouldn't apply, you just take a bloody 100 here. But it's all, I could go on for hours if you could just think of it. But. Well, Dick Lillett, who used to live in Bravian Court, the bus to worked in Barclays Bank trustee department with my wife. And he said to me, well, I may have caught the bus myself. He said to me one day, he says, you want to see, you get in touch with Janet Hicks, he says, she's going out with his Maharaja. And of course her father being Hicks, who owned the bus company, Braintree, that was his daughter. And I suppose that's how I got the tip off that she was going out with this Maharaja. So one thing and another, I must have went up Marshall's Road where she lived and got a picture of her running up the pathway to the house. That's all I remember. Whether I photographed I can't remember any more than that. I probably did, because we wouldn't have left the story alone. But we weren't a sensational paper in them days. They weren't looking for those, only because if I supplied it, they'd have it. And that appeared on the, I'm sure, on the front of the Daily Sketch, full page, for first page one. So we did, have a few pictures like that. Oh no, they broke up, it didn't work out, I remember that, but I don't think we followed it up. Well, I don't know, I forget now. So you remembered it anyway. Janet Hicks. Rings a bell, because I photographed the legs of a murdered girl way over the taxi somewhere, and the rats and gnawed her bloody legs because she'd been there overnight. That's the only gruesome thing I remember. I was there a long while, but when I planned that slowly that I was going to leave and I would do weddings, you see. So that's what I was on about. I was taking weddings while I was still on the Chronicle. They all knew about it. But so I built up an income, and then Ernie Doe came along, and that's what started me off with all these tractors. I was, when they invented the Triple D tractor, I was, I'd all been invited, well, I invited myself to photograph Ernie Doe's shoot in Norfolk, and one thing led to another, and I used to photograph his tractors, and one thing, and it was a regular income in those days when I left the Chronicle. Well, first of all, I was always doing shooting, because I was photographing shoots in those days, one of the few people doing it. And when I bought that shop, which I bought in 1970 for about 3,250, and half of that was a studio. And one day, I remember a little episode there, one day, a lady, well, my wife sat in the office doing the paperwork, and the two ladies came in to have their passport taken, two elderly ladies, and while I was taking the names and address down, and at that stage I had a pet squirrel which had a nest up in the top of the studio, up in the corner, and this squirrel ran along the floor, up one of these ladies' legs, and out again. I said, excuse me, madam, I said, you've got a squirrel up your leg. Oh, she said, I didn't mind it, I thought it was a cat, you know. Anyway, that was the end of the squirrel. But that did happen in the studio. Photographic studio, and then I'd always been interested in guns and whatnot. When the Chronicle was where it was, Leach's was just round the corner, the gun shop. And I spent quite a lot of time in there watching them loading the cartridges and doing it the old-fashioned way. So I learned quite a lot, or got interested a lot that way. And old George, who worked in there, I persuaded him to the Daily Sketch were good people to us. We had regular checks from them in those days, and of course the boys in the printing department knew that, and they all got a bit jealous. Even old Ralph Tyrrell and Ernie Bradley, they all knew what was going on. We were making, quite honestly, more money than they were by plugging stuff on the side. Then of course there was Janice, a good girl reports that married in Canada.
Farmer.
Well, quite honestly, somebody in the newsroom would tell me there was a story, the news editor or anybody would say, well, there's been a plane crash out in the Goodies or somewhere. But the point is what happened, as they worked for the London papers would phone them up to tell them, because somewhere around here, they all got tip-offs for phoning up London. And so therefore, they phoned up London that this big crash on the M1 had happened, or somewhere, and they got in touch with the Chronicle to say, because we could get there first. So really it benefited all round by them telling it, by them working for them. And I can't remember the cases now. I remember one interesting case when there was an air crash at Coggeshall, when another photographer on the paper then called Ron Goose. There's Ron Goose and Ron Crowe appeared at this crash, and the local policeman was just sorting people out for getting too close. And he said, "Where are you from?" So I said, "Well, we're from the Essex Chronicle. I'm Ron Crowe, and he's Ron Goose." And the copper said, "What's your paper? Bloody Birds Sanctuary." Yeah. So he had a sense of humour. Yes. One day, old Bob White from Fifield, who had a plane, this is when the Essex show was at Springfield, years ago. And he said, "Do you want a picture from up there?" I thought he got a long ladder or something. I said, "Well, why not you?" "Oh, I said, I've got a plane over there." So I said, "All right then." So we went up there on this plane and circled it. I took a few pictures, you know. When I came back, he was in a white sweat. "What are you sweating for?" He said, "You don't know how close we were coming in between them two trees." He said, "I never thought we was ever going to make it." And I saw the editor, Thompson, would happen to be there. And I told him I'd been up there, and I'd brought a big box of tools, as it happened walking around the show. He said, "We'll put those on expenses." So I got a big box of tools on expenses for that. But anyway, I think that appeared on the Chronicle was the first aerial picture of the Essex show. And I guess that's one thing I remember. One day when we came down from that same aircraft, old Bob White was there was smoke coming out of the bloody engine. There was only a Wagshousing nest on the bloody exhaust pipe of the aircraft when we landed. We all took it part of the joke, but it could have been what I could say is only guesswork, but when we worked at night, we got 10 and 6pence for an evening's work. 10 and 6, I remember that. So you always put 10 and 6 on the expenses. Because we obviously fiddled a few nights that we never ever went near the place. But I think I can remember £18 a week was the last wages I can remember about that. And because we was earning much more, later on we was earning much more from Fleet Street. So we didn't, you never worry about how much you were getting on the Chronicle, because that was it. And when I knew I was going to leave, we emphasised making money elsewhere. They knew all about that. And but money in those days didn't really appear to us. You were there doing a job. You enjoyed doing it. And the financial side, that's why I never lived beyond my means. I never had anything expensive, and nobody went to expensive things. Because in those days, you know, the paper, you never paid for anything, and there was a supply. And so you got used to having all your food paid for, which come really strange to this day. Where people thought about 20 quid for a meal was all in the money. Yes, I think we look back on it. I can't really comment on that, but you were more or less lucky to be there, let them get paid.